as a geopolitical bargaining chip to hijack the British taxpayer for armed military-grade security, has just collided with an absolute, unyielding concrete wall. According to explosive global dispatches leaking out from the ultimate palace insiders, King Charles III didn't just ignore the pressure this time. He didn't just smile for the cameras and pass the buck to a committee. No, he completely, aggressively, and unequivocally shut it down. For months, the narrative weaponized out of Montecito, California was blindingly obvious. Give us our automatic, state-funded royal protection back, or the dying king never touches his grandchildren again. It was a cold-blooded ultimatum cleverly wrapped in safety clothing. But tonight, the fallout is proving to be absolutely, entirely devastating for the Sussex Empire, because the king has officially chosen the survival of the British crown over emotional extortion. Are we looking at the final, permanent severance of the House of Windsor? Is Harry's calculated bluff officially dead in the water? Sit tight, lock your screen, and turn the volume all the way up. We are diving headfirst into the exclusive investigative breakdown of the most ruthless family showdown in modern history. The global media apparatus is currently in absolute freefall trying to process the sheer velocity of this palace lockdown. To truly understand the magnitude of this scandal, we have to look directly at the chessboard that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have been trying to operate on for the last 6 years. They thought they were playing a modern, fast-paced public relations game against a slow, antiquated institution that would naturally fold under the weight of negative American press. But what they completely failed to realize is that the British Crown doesn't think in terms of the next 24 hours or the next news cycle. The Crown thinks in terms of centuries, and King Charles just reminded his youngest son exactly who holds the sovereign keys to the kingdom. The controversy itself didn't just appear out of thin air last week. It is the culmination of a systematic, highly litigious, multi-year media campaign, waged from a mansion in California. Ever since the dramatic exit from royal life, the Sussex camp has relied on a very specific, high-risk strategy: public weaponization of private grievances. We saw it with the explosive Oprah Winfrey broadcast where accusations were hurled without a shred of immediate accountability. We saw it with the multi-million-dollar Netflix docuseries that painted the entire United Kingdom as a hostile environment. And we saw it in the pages of the memoir titled Spare, where Prince Harry quite literally detailed intimate family arguments for a global profit margin. But this latest demand was different. This wasn't just another round of reality television gossip or a complaint about who got which cottage on the Windsor estate. This was a direct, legally binding ultimatum aimed squarely at the British state and the pockets of the British taxpayer. According to deeply buried reports leaking from the highest echelons of the Home Office, the demand was delivered with absolute clarity: reinstate our permanent, taxpayer-funded, round-the-clock armed police protection whenever we set foot in the United Kingdom, or your grandchildren Archie and Lilibet will remain completely permanently exiled in America. It was a move calculated to exploit a grandfather's ultimate vulnerability. King Charles is 76 years old, navigating a terrifyingly intense cancer diagnosis that is actively being managed, but is fundamentally not in remission. He is a man facing his own mortality, while simultaneously bearing the crushing weight of a crown he waited his entire life to wear. Harry's team looked at that fragile human equation and mistakenly saw a weak target. They believed that a sick grandfather, desperate to hold his youngest grandchildren and build memories before time runs out, would easily pick up the phone, override the British government, and grant them the elite security status they so desperately crave for their global branding. But the trap snapped shut on the person who built it. The moment Harry linked the physical presence of his children to a financial and legal concession from the state, he transformed a private family matter into a constitutional crisis. He forced King Charles into a position where he couldn't just act as a loving grandparent. The king was forced to act as the head of state. And that is exactly where the Sussex calculation completely fell apart. The institutional machinery of the palace locked its gears, reviewed the legal boundaries, and delivered a freezing, absolute shutdown that has left the California camp entirely stranded. Our deep dive into the legal architecture of this standoff reveals that palace advisors laid out the reality to the king with terrifying precision. Royal security in the United Kingdom is not a personal gift that a monarch can just hand out like a piece of jewelry. It is governed strictly by an independent executive committee known as RAVEC, which assesses threat levels based on active public duties. When Harry voluntarily walked away from his royal responsibilities to pursue commercial entertainment deals in Hollywood, his security status automatically shifted. That is a matter of law, process, and constitutional integrity. If King Charles had stepped in, cracked his knuckles, and forced the Home Office to bend the rules for his son, it would have been a catastrophic abuse of royal power. It would have sent a message to the British public that state-funded, elite police protection can be bartered, extorted, and manipulated behind closed doors using family leverage. The international backlash would have been immediate, furious, and potentially fatal to the reputation of the modern monarchy. By completely shutting down the demand, Charles didn't just save himself from a massive political scandal. He protected the integrity of the sovereign throne that his eldest son, Prince William, is destined to inherit. This brings us directly into the hidden logistics that the mainstream media is completely terrified to talk about. The narrative pushed out by the Sussex public relations machine has always been that the United Kingdom is an entirely unsafe, hostile wasteland for their family. They want the public to believe that the moment Archie and Lilibet step off a plane in London, they will be surrounded by uncontrolled chaos and immediate physical danger. But investigative sources closely connected to the operational realities of royal security have completely blown that narrative out of the water, exposing it as nothing more than a highly dramatic legal negotiation tactic. The king didn't ask Harry to bring two small children to a chaotic, high-profile public event in the middle of a crowded London square. The open, standing invitation from the palace has always been for Balmoral Castle. Let us look at what Balmoral actually is when you strip away the romanticized Hollywood fog. It is a massive 50,000-acre private fortress buried deep within the rugged terrain of the Scottish Highlands. It is arguably one of the most heavily fortified, professionally monitored, state-secured private estates anywhere on the face of the earth. The security infrastructure at Balmoral doesn't just turn on when a specific royal arrives. It is a permanent, elite, year-round operation. We are talking about a location that routinely hosts global prime ministers, international world leaders, and foreign heads of state who face genuine documented military-grade assassination threats. These individuals stay on those grounds for weeks at a time without a single security breach in modern history. The entire estate is a closed ecosystem controlled entirely by armed forces and advanced surveillance. Consider the actual practical steps of a family visit to this estate. Harry and his family could easily board a private transatlantic flight from California. They would land at a heavily restricted, completely secure military airfield or private runway in Scotland. From there, they would be immediately transferred into pre-arranged, armored palace vehicles operating entirely on controlled royal roads and private terrain. They would arrive at the castle gates without ever once interacting with a single member of the public, a commercial space, or an uncontrolled environment. Once inside those 50,000 acres, Archie and Lilibet would be completely safe. They would be surrounded by the exact same elite security umbrella that protects the king himself. They could spend weeks playing on the private lawns, walking through the secured forests, and sitting in the private gardens with their grandfather, completely shielded from the paparazzi, the media, and any theoretical security threats. The infrastructure to give them a perfect, peaceful, deeply protected family vacation already exists, has always existed, and has been actively offered to them summer after summer. The moment you realize how effortless and secure a trip to Balmoral actually is, Harry's entire public safety argument completely disintegrates into thin air. It becomes blindingly obvious that this has never been about a father genuinely panicked over the physical safety of his 5-year-old daughter and 7-year-old son. If safety was the only objective, they would have been on those secure Scottish lawns last summer, the summer before that, and every single summer since they left. The logistics are already solved. The invitation is already signed. The only thing preventing those children from seeing their grandfather is a conscious, deliberate decision by their parents to hold them back until a political and financial victory is secured in a London courtroom. This is a high-stakes game of chicken where Harry completely miscalculated the resolve of the man sitting on the throne. He truly believed the king would break first under the agonizing weight of family separation and public pressure. But Charles, whatever else his critics might say about him, spent over 7 decades watching his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, navigate the most complex diplomatic crises on the planet. He understands with absolute certainty the profound weight of not responding to an ultimatum. He knows that in the theater of power, The moment you negotiate with a threat, you become a prisoner to the next one. The aftermath of this absolute shutdown is now actively ripping through the Sussex operation, and the panic behind the scenes is described as entirely unprecedented. Their ultimate leverage has been completely neutralized by a wall of dignified royal silence. They are realizing with absolute terror that the public is beginning to look past the complicated legal jargon and see the raw double standard driving this entire scenario. Because while Harry's legal team continues to file endless court appeals claiming the UK is uniquely dangerous, the global public is starting to track his actual international travel habits, and the contrast is absolutely devastating to his credibility. To continue exactly where the first part left off, we have to look closely at how the global media landscape is assessing the profound legal and physical contractions inside the Sussex camp. They are realizing with absolute terror that the public is beginning to look past the complicated legal jargon and see the raw double standard driving this entire scenario. Because while Harry's legal team continues to file endless court appeals claiming the United Kingdom is uniquely dangerous, the global public is starting to track his actual international travel habits, and the contrast is absolutely devastating to his credibility. The forensic examination of this security narrative completely implodes the moment you put a globe on the table and track the actual flight paths of the Duke of Sussex over the past 24 months. We have been told repeatedly and with immense dramatic emphasis that Great Britain is a unique geopolitical hazard. We are led to believe that the Metropolitan Police apparatus, backed by some of the most sophisticated counter-terrorism intelligence on Earth, cannot safely navigate a couple of children across a completely private field in the countryside. Yet, at the exact same time this legal narrative is being blasted through high-priced public relations channels, Prince Harry has demonstrated to the entire world that when an international destination aligns with his personal priorities, safety logistics cease to be an issue. The most striking example of this occurred when the Duke traveled directly to Ukraine. Let us be entirely clear about the physical reality of that environment. It was an active, volatile military conflict zone subject to erratic missile strikes and intense international surveillance. The British government did not step in to provide taxpayer-funded armed protection for that specific trip. The state did not deploy automatic royal bodyguards to watch over him while he navigated an active theater of war. The Sussex operation did not cancel the journey, nor did they issue public ultimatums declaring the environment entirely unsolvable. They quietly mobilized elite private security networks, coordinated with local security forces, solved the complex transportation parameters, and executed the trip safely and effectively. The legal and analytical cross-examination here is entirely brutal. If your private security apparatus is sophisticated enough to safely navigate the logistics of an Eastern European war zone, how can you look an international audience in the eye and claim it is physically impossible to safely cross a private royal estate in Scotland? The moment you prove you can safely enter a literal military conflict, but claim you cannot safely enter Balmoral, the safety argument officially dies. It stops looking like a genuine concern for human safety and reveals itself as a highly calculated political battleground. This battleground isn't actually about the immediate safety of Archie and Lilibet during a brief summer vacation. Investigative insiders working within the British legal system have pointed out that this is a long-term precedent negotiation. Harry's legal team is fighting for a permanent, lifetime, automatic security status that would outlast the current reign of King Charles. They are trying to secure a constitutional guarantee that would legally and financially bind Prince William's future administration, forcing the British public to fund their security indefinitely, regardless of their commercial status. By completely shutting down the demand and refusing to intervene in the independent government process, King Charles has effectively cut the cord on this long-term strategy. The fallout from this refusal has sent shockwaves through the commercial operations in California, because their entire global positioning relies heavily on their perceived proximity to the crown. The moment the king establishes a hard line of separation, their unique institutional value on the global market begins to experience a massive, undeniable freeze. Look at how this institutional freeze is manifesting in the real world right now outside the immediate family circle. The international sports world, which operates on its own brutal calculations of commercial value, brand credibility, and status, is already making its own independent adjustments. This summer, The FIFA World Cup is dominating the absolute center of global sports diplomacy across the United States. It is a multi-billion-dollar corporate juggernaut operating right in the very country where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have chosen to build their post-royal commercial empire. Yet, when you look at the public face of this massive international tournament, Prince Harry is entirely absent from the elite diplomatic arrangements. Instead, the figure operating at the absolute highest level of sporting diplomacy alongside international organizers is David Beckham. The history here is deeply ironic and highly telling for anyone tracking the social shifts behind this scandal. The falling out between the Sussexes and the Beckhams traces back to intense, entirely unfounded palace accusations regarding media leaks that were later traced back to a completely unrelated salon receptionist. The commercial consequences of those social fractures are now playing out on the global stage with total clarity. Beckham, who has publicly stated that whenever Prince William asks him to support an initiative, the answer is always an automatic yes, is positioned at the absolute epicenter of the biggest sporting event in American history. Meanwhile, the king's youngest son, living in the exact same territory where the tournament is executing its multi-million-dollar operations, is completely siloed away from the institutional prestige. The public reactions to these parallel stories are creating a highly toxic narrative trap for the California camp. The world is watching a highly visible international demonstration of who carries genuine institutional weight and who has successfully alienated themselves from the global network. It is an objective, measurable demonstration that choices have massive, compounding consequences, and that the palace's strategic silence is slowly letting the air out of the Sussex branding machine without ever having to engage in a public media battle. But the social and commercial isolation is nothing compared to the devastating human parallel that is now actively surfacing in every serious psychological analysis of this story. This is the dimension of the scandal that makes the entire public relations team in California completely uncomfortable, because it introduces a pattern that is completely impossible to spin. Right now, Archie and Lilibet are growing up in a complete, absolute vacuum, entirely isolated from both sides of their extended family. On one side of the Atlantic, their maternal grandfather, Thomas Markle, has been completely and aggressively severed from their lives for years. There are no weekend visits, no private phone calls, and zero digital contact. The Sussex camp has consistently justified this total extraction by pointing directly to his past conduct, his cooperation with the tabloid press before the royal wedding, and his subsequent public commentary. They established a rigid corporate framework of familial accountability. If your behavior damages the collective trust, your access to the children is permanently revoked. But the moment you take that exact same ethical framework and apply it to the other side of the Atlantic, the logical integrity of their position completely collapses. Let us look objectively at the documented conduct of King Charles toward the Sussex camp over the last 6 years of non-stop public warfare. He endured the explosive Oprah Winfrey broadcast without launching a single public retaliation. He watched the multi-part Netflix docuseries without authorizing the palace communications team to brief the press against his son. He sat through the highly personal, invasive pages of the memoir Spare, which targeted his character and his marriage, and he refused to file a single legal challenge or issue a public rebuttal. Instead of closing the door, senior royal correspondents have consistently confirmed that Charles has done the exact opposite of Prince William. William has hardened his position into an absolute concrete wall, drawing a permanent line in the sand. Charles, by contrast, has consistently left doors open, reached out quietly through trusted intermediaries, and absorbed significant public hurt without ever revoking his baseline grace. So if we are to strictly honor the Sussex doctrine that conduct determines access, what conduct has King Charles displayed that justifies the total withholding of his grandchildren? He has displayed nothing but sustained institutional restraint, quiet personal patience, and an open standing invitation to a highly secured estate. When you apply their own metric to the king, the mathematical equation simply does not balance. It becomes entirely obvious to the global public that the two situations yield the exact same tragic outcome for the children, despite having completely opposite inputs. Two grandfathers living on completely opposite sides of the world, coming from entirely different socio-economic backgrounds, yet both sharing an identical fate. Total absolute absence from the daily lives of the same two children. This identical outcome is the exact type of structural pattern that biographers and psychologists will eventually examine with absolute clinical seriousness. Because when every single grandparental relationship in a young family has been completely severed, the analytical question inevitably shifts away from why each individual relationship failed.